Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the uLawPractice webinar on this Friday afternoon, yet another uLaw webinar, and I thank you for participating in this webinar. Just some housekeeping before we get started. Today's webinar session has been approved by the Law Society of Upper Canada for 1.5 hours of professionalism CPD credits, and it's also approved for 1 hour of CPD credits by the Law Society of British Columbia. So I do want to highlight that today's session has been approved for credits, and I request you to go ahead and report those credits after the completion of the session. I also request you to send us an email or provide feedback through your email about your participation and how we can make these types of sessions in the future more meaningful to yourself and your colleagues in the community. For those who've just joined us, kindly do use the chat window so that you could ask questions and participate in this CPD session. We've learned that through Q&A and through understanding from others' perspectives, we tend to learn a lot more. A big part of this session today is just going to be, uLawPractice, our experience, our understanding of practice management, having gone through the bookkeeping guidelines, having run a successful legal accounting and practice management software for the last 4 years, and also doing a lot of research about what are the expectations from the Law Society from a practice management perspective. So it's really a mind share, and we sincerely appreciate if you can also participate in that mind share by using the chat window. Your lines are muted, so kindly do use the chat window for that. So it's almost an hour and a half of CPD credits that has been approved. So we're going to try and keep this as packed as possible. There's about 20 plus slides that I'm going to be talking about, and I thank you for participating. And once again, kindly do use your phones. It's always with these types of webinars, we've found that if you're calling in from your phone, a landline, or your cell phone, the audio quality is that much better. The last typical question that we're being asked is if this would be recorded and available. All uLaw webinars are recorded and are available in less than 3 days within our YouTube channel, and so with this session as well. Okay? So moving along, like any other uLaw webinar, this particular webinar has an agenda, and it's going to talk about practice management in general, but we've kind of broken down practice management from a perspective of the professional obligations that you as a legal professional have towards not only how you manage your practice, the different Law Society guidelines that govern how you run the practice. We're going to talk about the different reports, the practice itself, how do you organize yourself to be more successful, to be more profitable, because a big part of the bookkeeping guidelines is not only to mandate rules and regulations, but the bookkeeping guidelines also is there to help and support and guide you through how you can be a successful legal professional and a business owner. Because a big part of being a legal professional, especially if you're solo or a small firm, is also learning the hoops of how you can be a successful entrepreneur, business owner, and actually the work that you're doing is that of a legal professional, right? So we're going to be talking about the different professional obligations you have broken down into these 7 different components, by and large. And obviously there are going to be a few breakaways from some of these larger topics, but overall, we're going to be talking about these different 7 subject areas, if you will, under the professional obligations that you have under the practice management's guidelines. Okay? So starting with client intake, service, and communication, which typically is your first step into understanding the need of a client. That's kind of the first touch point, if you will, with the outside world, between once you've established yourself as a firm, marketed your firm, and now you're starting to receive leads, inputs, clients coming in. It's really your first step in that process. The next step, obviously, is once you have that client, how do you better service that client? How do you better communicate with that client in regards to your capability, the service that you're offering, the service level agreements, and the quality assurance that you provide as a legal professional to your clients. The next topic we're going to cover is about file management. File management is, as per the bookkeeping guidelines, is an ability for you to categorically organize files or matters, however you like to call that, and ensure that it's available to you in an easy, searchable, indexable form so that it's easy to retrieve information on a need basis, whether that's for audits or whether that's for your own purposes. Having files and matters organized categorically is a big part of the bookkeeping guidelines, guidelines, if you will. After file management, so let's say you have got that first client in, you've ensured that you've communicated your service levels, you've established those protocols, you've also created that matter or file for that individual. A big part of the next steps is obviously getting into the fee structure. I can see that someone has reported that the audio is not working. I would kindly appreciate if you could dial into the phone number that's provided. As I mentioned, if you're logging in using your computer, then it's purely based on the internet speed of your location. So in the calendar invitation that we provided, we have provided you phone numbers that you could use to dial into. Okay. So carrying along with financial management is also establishing your fee structure, is really establishing how you plan on laying out the fees, whether that's billable time, or whether that's a flat rate or a combination of these two, whether it's a contingency fee. So really establishing how you plan on charging your client for the service you're offering is a big part of the financial management. So again, thank you very much for sharing it. Yes, if the audio is not clear through the computer, kindly dial in using your phone. So we looked at client intake, service communication, file, financial. Now comes the business management. The fact that now you've started a business as a legal professional, the fact that you've now got a client, you established protocols, you've agreed upon how you would charge them, and let's say they've started paying you for that service. Depending on the silo of practice, based on, I do need to take the presentation back from my friend who had requested to present, which is really never a good sign. There you go. Sorry about that. So following along with the business management aspect of it is really talking about how you manage your business numbers. So let's say you've got your income, you want to manage the income based on the different silos of practice. You've started now expending money, so you want to talk about the expenses of the business and then combine that to really understand the profit and loss of your business in general. And if you're in the habit of, let's say, taking trust money as part of retainers, as a big part of financial and the business management obligations is to ensure that you're following strict guidelines and law society protocols to ensure the sanity of those trust money dollars, and you're taking the right steps, whether that's retainer coming into the trust account, and once you've generated an invoice, you're doing the right steps of moving that money accordingly from trust to general. Okay, so we're going to talk about all of these one at a time. I'm just trying to paint a picture so that you know for how long and what topics are going to be covered in today's webinar. Professional management. It's a big component of being a legal professional is being part of this huge body of professionals who all have similar, if not very, the same levels of obligations, same levels of issues, same levels of positiveness in terms of being part of that profession. So professional management talks about participating in sessions like these. It's highly encouraged that you join sessions, webinars, participate in in-person seminars even, understand where the industry is moving, understand the rules that govern it. Rules are changing on almost an everyday basis, keeping yourself up to date, even understanding trends with technology. Okay, how can technology and the advent of technology enable you as a legal professional in today's age to be more efficient and profitable? So that's all part of the professional management, obviously being part of the Law Society or any specific association that you may be associated with today. Again, those are all part of the professional aspects of your obligations. And the last two components, obviously very critical to any business, to any individual, is about managing time. And we explicitly talk about time management in the context of a legal professional simply because there is so much to do. And it almost seems there's less time, especially certain silos of practice where you need to deal with 15, 20, 30, 40 matters at any given time. There's a lot of multitasking that needs to be accomplished. So preparing for that, planning your day, planning your week, and managing your time between what you do at work and not every time taking that back home, ensuring that you have enough time for yourself to enjoy with your family and friends are all critical in this very stressful, fast-paced legal environment. Okay? Last but not the least, personal management, which almost, kind of borders what I mentioned with time management, is in this very busy, commoditized life, being a legal professional with all that extra effort and stress that you need to take in, managing multiple things at the same time, ensuring trust money, ensuring that you're getting paid on time, ensuring now you're marketing your services, following up with referrals. There's so much to be done. You want to, by design, right from the get-go, find a way that you can plan your life and ensure that you have enough time for yourself, for your own personal management, whether that's exercise, sport, yoga, anything else that can actually bring your focus back to the next day in a very refreshed way. Those are all the components. We're going to give you some feedback from what we've heard, and we're just going to share some slides that talk about some ideas that you may want to take home today of to how you can maybe, if you're already doing this, fantastic. You want to continue doing that. If you're just getting started, these are just some of the ideas that may help you as you ponder about how you can be better in personal management. Okay? So really trying to paint the picture. We're going to now go one at a time and have a deeper dive, if you will, and let's have fun with these sessions. Please feel free to ask any questions that you may have, and our support staff at uLaw will be happy to answer that. Okay, so I think there's a quick question about, are we providing any materials? The material truly would be the recorded aspect of this entire webinar. Definitely not as part of this webinar are we providing any samples of precedents. But we're going to definitely show you examples about file management, financial business management, etc. Okay. Keep in mind we've submitted this entire presentation to the Law Society, and they have approved the content. And obviously we need to go through that approval process of actually presenting the exact slides. But at the same time trying to make this a lot more fun for you as the participant. When it comes to professional obligations now, as I said, we've further broken it down. As I said, client intake, those 7 different major topics. We've broken down now client intake, service, and communication as the first subject area into further subcategories. Okay? And what those subcategories are purely based on the chronological order in which we believe those actions would occur in real life, for example. So let's assume you've started your law firm, your legal firm, you've passed all the examinations, flying colors, or you've been in business for a long time now. A big part of day-to-day existence is marketing your service, being part of a network, through referrals, other channels, promoting your firm and the services that you can offer to this community. And let's say that first client or that 100th client steps into your firm's doorsteps or your virtual office or gives you a phone call. It really doesn't matter how that first client experience knocks the door. One of the first steps that you have an obligation towards is understanding and, very importantly, recording those calls and consultations that you provide, whether it's at a fee or whether it's a pro bono that you provide to market your service, because that's how you want to get famous amongst a certain group or the community in general. That's great. I mean, you can still do that, but whether it's a client that's giving you information to retain you for work, or if it's just for general payment, regardless, a client calls in, one of the first obligation is to record in detail that call and the consultation that happened. Okay? And that's part of the client intake process. So what are you recording is the person's information, first name, last name. The Law Society has some examples of client intake forms. I'll be happy to share some of the basic information that we capture at uLaw, being a legal accounting and practice management software later on. So yeah, you're capturing basic client information, address or correspondence address or communication address is very critical. So you're obviously collecting that information. That's for mailing purposes, information purposes. A phone number, obviously, if you want to correspond, you could send emails, so you could collect emails today. And yeah, so you want to understand that. And further to that initial client intake comes the next step of really understanding what area of practice is this person looking for you to represent. Is it a small claims? Is this a fence issue with the neighbor? Or is this a criminal matter? Or is this a POA? If it's a highway traffic ticket, all that's part of that initial consult. But before you actually go about creating a file, that's kind of it seems almost a logical next step, isn't it? So before you actually go about doing that, the Law Society would like you to just be aware about any conflicts that may arise in representing this individual. So let's say Mr. Bean knocks the door, you've got all his information in, got his address. You want to just make sure, if you're a newer firm, obviously if you're just getting started and if Mr. Bean is your first client, then you don't obviously have that level of intense search that's required because you pretty much know your clients by name and this is apparently your first client. But let's imagine once your firm grows, and it sure will, over a period of time, and now you've gone 2 years into your practice, Mr. Bean is a distant past. You've gone through many other clients, and you're, as good as your memory serves. You need a system, and that's where we start to promote and talk about legal accounting software or software in general, and how that can help you automate these processes now to be more efficient and proficient even in doing this. So a conflict check for confidential information about that individual client is a very important next step that the Law Society talks about, ensuring that you are well aware of whether you've come across Mr. Bean in a previous matter. Has Mr. Bean been a witness in a different matter? Has he been a different, let's say, a party? Have you ever created a matter for someone like Mr. Bean, maybe his wife, his sister? So are there any conflicts at all, right, in representing this individual now? You understand that, you create that conflict screening, understand that conflict screening, have Law Society report that outlines why you now determine your understanding of whether there's a conflict and what you want to do next. Are you actually going to go ahead and create a matter and file and actually represent this individual? Or because of conflict reasons, now are you going to pass this file to a colleague or a friend, which is the right thing to do? Or knowing that there's a conflict, you still go ahead and create the file. Whatever is your decision is yours to make, but you're still recording that you're fully aware of the conflict in or not in representing that individual. Okay, so that's kind of our next step in this 5-step process, or kind of a workflow that we've drawn out here. As part of that service and communication, a very important next step as we spoke, is determining the collateral for fees, or what is your fee structure? Are you in the business of retaining or accepting trust money? There are legal professionals that deal with trust money as retainers, and it's being a legal professional, you do have that opportunity to accept retainers almost as an advance or as money that you can have in pooled trust accounts or mixed trust accounts and draw from it as you start to show that you've put in the effort and completed that effort through, let's say, an invoice, for example, right? Very few professions in this world have not only that opportunity, but it's obviously a responsibility as well, okay? So with more power comes more responsibility. So you're almost Spider-Man. So determining what those fees are, really laying out that in a format. So a good practice or something to think about would be, as you start your firm or as you try to improvise your service levels and communications, have a document that's really clearly talking about your fee structure for various different silos of practice. You may have a flat fee for a certain practice area. You may have a time and material or a billable fee structure for certain others, right? Right up front, you could have that document available for clients to review, or during your consultation or your discussions. Talk about your ability to collect retainers. A prerequisite, obviously, is creating a retainer or a trust account with a bank, CIBC, RBC, TD, etc. Or if you're not in the business of collecting retainers, it's just getting paid with a leap of faith that, once the work's done and you raise that invoice, that you're hoping that your clients are going to pay you for that work, and that's fine too. Okay, we have clients that we serve that purely work out of personal referral, and every client they represent is someone they know, so they completely trust that once the work's done, that individual client who they know will actually pay them for it. The whole concept of the retainer, as you probably know, is to safeguard and ensure that you're getting paid for the work in advance. Because sometimes in this world, as a legal professional, you will come across situations where if you've not collected that retainer, you may actually go about with that leap of faith, putting all the effort, going to court, drafting those documents, and then come down short where your client said, I'm sorry, I can't pay you for that fee because I don't have money, right? So those are things that you probably have already come across or may come across depending on your situation. And that's where you have the trust money available. Okay, enough said about determining collaterals for fees. So determine your fee structure, communicate that clearly to your clients so they're fully aware of that. Talk about your trust policies, and or if not. The next step, so let's say you do agree upon that you are in the business of accepting retainers and you're going to be collecting that upfront. You want to make sure that you're following fully compliant Law Society's bookkeeping guidelines where you deposit that money into your trust account. You don't take it into a general. You deposit retainers into your trust account. And with trust, the Law Society gives you the flexibility to accept retainers in the form of cash, up to a dollar amount of $7,500. So between $1 to $7,500, you can accept cash retainers, but it's highly recommended and very important that you are able to provide a receipt so that you fully are transparent in letting your client know and also safeguarding yourself that $7,500 was really what the initial retainer was. So depositing the retainer into a trust account, providing a receipt to the client, staying fully transparent is a big component of that initial service and communication process. The last step, obviously, is a cornerstone. Like, let's say there's and happens after the client has maybe given you a lot of information about him or her, flirted with the idea of retaining you, goes through the whole process, the 9 yards, and then decides to non-engage you, which means that they don't plan on working with you or taking your service. You're still obligated to provide them with a non-engagement letter that clearly outlines the case for why was. I'll take a step back. A non-engagement is not necessarily a one-way traffic. A non-engagement actually is a two-way traffic. So not only is your client able to non-engage you for whatever reason, you as a legal professional have every right to non-engage your client at different stages of the matter, as long as it's clearly drafted, communicated, and articulated, regardless. So it's a two-way street, and regardless, a non-engagement letter that clearly outlines why that situation arose and why that has led to this would be a much recommended and a much-needed document that kind of goes with the flow of safeguarding the responsibilities that you have. Okay, and as part of that non-engagement, if you have to refund that retainer, then that's another step that you have to take. You've got to provide that $500 retainer that you accepted. You may have to pay it right back. Okay. The big component of what we're looking to stress upon here is being the first step in communicating with that prospective client. Keep in mind that these are some of the common steps that you will come across, right? From client intake, the type of information you're collecting, to establishing their service levels. Who are you as a legal professional? What are your experiences? How can you assure that victory of that individual for that particular file? And communicating the appropriate fee structure, the policies that surround that, and all the law societies or the responsibilities and the law society's compliance boundaries that extend this entire obligation is what we're looking to outline through the slide. Okay? So let's just continue to move along, one slide or another. So now we wanted to take a slightly different step and kind of having a deeper dive from a perspective of typical documentation. Because being a legal professional, I'm sure you're well aware, and you knew it when you came into this profession, that there's a lot of documents that need to be documented. Okay, and with each step, with each workflow, each phase of the client correspondence or you dealing with that client matter, there are various different types of documents that you come across. So at this early stage of client intake, service, and communication, let's take a little sample of some of the documents that you most certainly will come across. So a retainer agreement, okay? Big part, especially if you're collecting retainers, then this is a big component of that retainer agreement, outlining the nature and scope of the matter. And we spoke about it. Hey, this is me. I'm representing you in this small claims matter because, you're being sued. You're the plaintiff or the defendant in this particular matter in your fence issue with your neighbor, right? Client responsibilities, a very, very important step, many times overlooked. It's not only you're not just the only party responsible for your obligations. As a legal professional, you want to outline the obligations that the client has as part of this equation, being responsive. So you do, there's enough talk about how legal professions may not be the most communicative with clients, but I think that, let's say you actually take that extra step of communicating with your client, because that's a big part of your practice, but the client does not respond back to you in time. You want to outline those experiences or outline those understanding upfront, saying, hey, I kindly request you and expect to get an answer from you for, let's say, a question that I may have within the stipulated time. Okay, drawing the boundaries and the SLAs around that. Paying me on time, very big client responsibility. Whether it's a net 15, net 30, or pay me as I bill you, whatever that is a client responsibility that he accepts and signs, or he or she accepts and signs up in working with you. Scheduling and course of representation, method and frequency of communication. So are you going to be the one communicating only during the times when it's time for invoice, or are you able to go the extra mile to communicate, when there's a really good docket or an event that needs to be communicated, or are you going to be the person who communicates every time something happens? How do you plan on communicating? Is this going to be a letter that the client should receive? Is this an email? And if it's an email, then you obviously talk about the risks associated, as we talk here, the risks associated with certain methods of communication. Email is electronic, it's out there, it's in the cloud. Now, no one questions whether emails are cloud-based these days because they're things of the past. So Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, even your Outlook is cloud-based. Defining those boundaries. Then moving on to the retainer arrangement. So how much is the fee? Okay. Is it $1,000 that you're accepting as a retainer? Is it $5,000? Depending on the style of practice. How often do you plan on replenishing your retainer? Would it be once you hit 20% or 80% of your retainer, you're going to ask for a top-up? All that needs to be outlined. Or this is a great opportunity through this retainer agreement to outline those policies and rules that you would like to govern as part of this transaction. Termination, as we spoke about non-engagement, for some reason we do need to terminate, outline all the boundaries and restrictions and how you or the other party can terminate. Client confidentiality, very important, ensuring that the information that you store would not be shared with other parties. So yeah, this is a good subset of the pieces of information that you would capture in one of the most important documents in this phase, which is the retainer agreement. Okay? What other documents can we talk about during this phase? I'm not sure if it's okay. Before we move on to the file management, I think that's one of the other questions that just came up. So a good question would be, a retainer receipt is a document. You may think that it's a receipt, but it's still considered as a legal document because if you've received a cash retainer, as I said, we've had some horror stories from clients that have taken a $500 retainer, sometimes forgotten to provide them a receipt, and had problems with the client came back and said, I actually paid you $5,000. Without a receipt, it's a lot of paperwork to go and a lot of trails to go back to prove it wrong, right? So giving a receipt is right there. It's in the face. There's nothing to contemplate on that. So a client intake form is a very important document. That's where you're capturing all of the information. A retainer receipt, a retainer agreement. What else? You may want to collect driver's license. So really understanding that this is the individual that's actually gone about representing or working with you. That's really the client. You may want to get their driver's license just to make sure that this is that same individual. We spoke about doing a conflict search, so a conflict report would be a great part of this. So yeah, that's just a few examples to give you of documents that may be available during this phase. Okay. So moving along kind of to the next big subtopic, file management. Okay. Let's say you've got that client, you've done the intake, got the retainer, or maybe not, but regardless, you've retained the customer. Let's assume you've got it. The next step in representing that client is creating that file or that matter, right? It's a very logical next step. We're going to try and paint a picture about some of the best practices and some of the things that you want to keep in mind as you go about creating that file. Keep in mind that you are able to do all of these obligations and be very compliant whether you use the software or not. You can do this completely manual, the old school way, and it's totally fine. The advent of technology as a legal professional, as I've mentioned, has just given you the ability to do it faster, more accurately, and more efficiently through the use of software. Okay, now that's pretty much about it. So if you want to take advantage of all those different factors that contribute to why you should use a software, doesn't have to be any specific software. It could be a choice that you, based on your research and based on what your colleagues are telling you, you make that decision, decide that. But using this is obviously going to help. And I mentioned that at this stage because file management is all about ensuring that you're able to have a chronological, categorized way of arranging all these files, whether it's a manual physical file or a file that's available in an electronic format. Okay? And it needs to be unique. So we're going to talk about all of those components. So a file management, what is one of the first components we thought would be important, would be having a checklist. So a checklist of what are the different components that this file or this matter, or this vanilla folder is going to have. Okay, so starting with, the conflict screening or the conflict completion. So prior stage, have you done that? Perfect. You are fully aware. That's a great first step. Now comes to the different attributes of the file itself. Has to be unique, easily searchable or indexable. Can you categorize it based on the area of practice? If it's even for the same client, and this is a very important question we come across quite often, and I've repeated this many times in many other sessions. So let's say for that client, Mr. Bean, you're representing him in multiple different types of matters. One could be, it could still be a real estate, for example. It could still be the same silo. Real estate, purchase of a condo, selling of a condo. Two different matters. You definitely need to keep in mind that those two different matters need two different matter numbers. So just because it's the same client doesn't mean that it has to be the same file number. In fact, it shouldn't. Because the attributes, everything that surrounds that matter may differ. You may have just done a inter-matter trust transfer between these two matters. How do you define that as file numbers if you have both as the same number, right? So long story short, keep in mind that even if it's for the same client that you're developing multiple matters, have a process, have a system, have a software that can give you unique numbers for each of those different matters. In that manila folder, let's assume it's the old school way and you've got this yellow manila folder and you're going to put all these papers in. What else can it be? What else can be part of that folder, whether it's electronic or otherwise? Recording of all client interactions. Okay? So, whether that's a docketable, billable interaction or not, you still need to capture that interaction. It's still a part of that file. We want to hope that it's all billable, because that's a big part of you being successful and profitable and in business. So very important to have a way or a mechanism, again, a system or a software that allows you to record these interactions. And I underline, record these interactions as much as possible, as and when they happen. Whether you write it down in a diary and then go back to update your software, or have the ability to do it right within the software using an app or a cloud-based system or a desktop solution, whatever that is, it's very important that you're able to capture that information, that interaction, when it's still live in your memory. Okay? Good examples of interactions. Initial client meeting. Okay? Court visits. Or could also be dockets or events that have happened in that file. Could be document drafting, review of documents, various different tasks based on the style of practice that you may deal with, but these are all critical components that become a part of that file. I underline that it's got to be chronologically ordered so that you can have a context to what's happened through the life cycle of that file. And the Law Society, again, it's a guideline. It's not a mandatory rule that talks about organization of that file through numeric and cross-indexing. And the bottom line is that it's got to be unique. Whether you have a mechanism to come up with your own unique numbering system, or you use a software that provides you with a unique numbering system, regardless, it's in your best interest to have each file in a unique numbering system that's easy to search and have multiple files, even if it's for the same client, for multiple matters. And why is it important that you have this in a way that you can search it? And what is cross-indexing? So cross-indexing is obviously the ability for you to search for a contact or a file or a matter, especially when it's involving an individual across multiple matters. Okay, so you have Mr. Bean in the purchase of a condo, but Mr. Bean is also a witness in a different matter. Knowing the different contacts, clients' information in your database or within your files and how they all cross-index across other files is very critical. And that's where software helps you with that so that you don't have to necessarily be on top of that in a very manual basis. Okay, so kind of very high level, we're just talking things that I'm sure pretty much many of you, if not all of you, know. The one thing that we thought we'll share is obviously having separate files for respective matters. We've actually come across clients that didn't have that in the past before they onboarded into uLaw, for example. Another quick question. What are the different documentations that become a part of the file management? Important documents that could be part of the file management obviously is providing your, the different emails, correspondences, letters that go out. Could be invoices, big part of the file management, right? We never spoke about it. We're going to talk about it, the financial management aspect. But invoices and receipts of payments all become part of that file over a period of time, right? So as in when you continue down the path of completion of this file, from that first client intake to final closure, there's going to be quite a few documents to go along the way. It could be court documents. So if it's a small claims, maybe there's a plaintiff's claim. A plaintiff's claim is a court form that you fill out, and that could be, and that should be part of the whole file management. Conflicting reports, as I mentioned before. And I think someone just asked me a quick question around the different documents that are available. And again, I'm just using uLaw as an example, and this should be available in any legal accounting software. Client ID verification, a very important part of the file that you can have available. Conflict hearing reports, retainer letters. You may have an authorization letter for wills in the estate, for example. Non-engagement becomes a part of that. And yes, you obviously have your receipts, your statement of activities, timesheets, depending on your arrangement with the client. If you've told him or her that you're going to be sending them timesheets to validate the work that you've put in, then that's important too. Settlement and accounts. This could be, based on the style of practice, that could be a very critical document at this phase of your interaction with the client. Okay. So we looked at client intake service summary, some obligations there. The first step into accepting your client. The second step obviously is creating a file, kind of understanding components that are best suited in terms of best practices that you may want to keep in mind as you continue down the path of creating these files or matters, all the different types of documents that are going to be in play during this phase. And then the next major subcategory we spoke about in those 7 different subcategories of our professional obligation is financial management. Okay? The financial management, as I said, kind of overlays across multiple phases. In setting up the rules that govern the fee structure, financial management comes there, setting expectations. So that's part of the fee scheduling of hourly rate. And it's important that it's documented too, because again, examples of horror stories is if you've not done that, then neither you nor your client have a common ground. If you make assumptions that you're actually going to be charging him on a hourly time, and he makes assumptions that it's a flat fee for whatever reason, and if there's no common ground to accept on what those terms are, then that's definitely not a successful relationship, right? So establishing that fee schedule, retainers, how often you would be topping up those retainers, even how you plan on recording billable time, what components of your business are you going to do flat rate, etc. All of that becomes a big part of your financial management and your obligation to your client. Prompt transmission, and big component of this is the responsibility that you have of generating those invoices, to your client for your own, benefits. There's two benefits to that. Number one comes to the legal professional, because you want to take advantage of every possible way to do those interim bills. And the reason why we say that is twofold. One is you want to get your client in a bit of a good habit, if you will, good or bad, in a habit, if you will, of knowing that they're going to be getting these bills instead of receiving this one large bill at the end of the month or end of the year, type of, depending on your style of practice again, is getting them to the habit of knowing that there's going to be a cyclic, time-bound, or event-bound invoice that they should expect. So they kind of get into the habit, make interim bills, and you're also testing the waters, making sure that they're paying you on time. Maybe you start with, a couple of dockets of a couple of hours, ensure that they're paying you, so you really want to get into that groove of working through that financial relationship as well with your client. The second is for your own purposes in terms of business management, of keeping your cash flow going. Okay, so you don't want to put all that effort in, and then at the end of 6 months figure out that this guy's not going to pay you the whole amount, especially if you're dealing with disbursements and you're paying it out of your pocket to begin with, right? So if you're doing disbursements, let's say general disbursements, that's where you're paying first out of your own credit card or general account, and then raising an invoice and then getting yourself paid, then you want to get in the habit of doing timely invoices. Okay, so a software again would give you the flexibility of reminding you of when you can raise that, keeps a tab of all the work that you've put in across multiple matters and reminds you of the various different invoices that have to be raised. You can also generate pre-bills and send it to your clients if you want to make sure that they're happy with what they're seeing and they're going to be comfortable in you raising a bill as well. Law firms do that quite often. So there's various different ways of actually approaching that. Now we spoke about how you want to get in the habit of getting these individuals paying you on time, raising invoices, and going through that whole process also is going to capture this very important pain point in the legal industry today, which is whether it's not being paid on time or making trust errors. Okay, there's two components to it. We'll discuss it separately. The first, obviously, is getting paid or not getting paid on time. So if it's a net 30, it is a known fact that not all legal firms or solo practitioners get paid on time. There's only so much you can do about it, but in being proactive and knowing the types of clients, the types of areas of practice in which you're prone to such kind of practice or habit, at least gives you a proactive measure to avoid, such, if you can, avoid such clients and avoid such areas of practice. If you put in all the effort and all you're making and you're not getting paid on time in, let's say, a small claim, and you've been able to track that over a period of time, then you probably want to consider doing something else. Because the whole purpose of, outside the fact that you're a Good Samaritan, you've come here to change law and, practice law, you're also a business owner, so you always want to be cognizant of being a smart entrepreneur and a smart business owner. Okay. And the other aspect is keeping in mind trust errors. This is something that the Law Society frowns upon. The fact that you don't have a system lets you do this manually, you are prone to making such errors. I'm not saying you are going to, but you're prone to doing so, especially when it's manual. Trust errors examples would be over withdraw on trust money. So let's say you just received $1,000 of trust money from an individual, and you just bill him for $500. And if you don't have a system of knowing that there's only $500 that you can withdraw, if it's manual, you may get in the habit of actually withdrawing $600 from trust, where the eligible trust amount, in fact, was only $500. That's just a quick example to give you of such errors that you want to avoid and keep in mind and be very cognizant of when it comes to financial management. Recording general accounts through general receipts and disbursement entries. So, we spoke about this as part of getting paid on time. You definitely want to find a way, a mechanism of tracking all the expenses that you pay on behalf of your client, and that's what's called disbursements. Whether it's disbursements for a fax, whether it's a disbursement for an application fee, whether it's a disbursement because it's a third-party consultant that you got to pay. Maybe it's a paralegal that's a stand-in and you have to pay that paralegal, but you still are going to charge. Whether it's disbursement for a software like a DivorceMate or uLaw or PCLaw, whatever that is, when you're charging it back to your client, you want to keep in mind that these disbursements, if it's general, you're paying it off your own pocket, need to be tracked. Receipts need to be kept. If you've actually had a lunch or a coffee, keep those receipts. Take a photocopy of it, throw it into the software, or ensure you have it all part of that manila folder. Okay? That can all support that invoice. Keep it as transparent as possible for your clients so that they're not going to come back to you with questions, bottom line. And the more you have those general receipts and disbursements and you're tracking it on time, raising invoice on time, you're going to notice that your fiscal discipline, there's two different types of disciplines. The physical is how you keep your body fit. And as a business owner, you want to keep in mind the fiscal discipline. It's a new term, fancy word that I picked up. It's FISCAL, fiscal discipline. It's a very important component that not all of us have, but it's a great thing to think about right away if you're going to be in this business of being an owner, legal professional, solo entrepreneur. Okay? So all of this is all going back to having that fiscal discipline. And having all of this, what's it going to help with? It's going to help with your general reconciliation at the end of the month. It's not a law society mandatory report. A trust reconciliation is a mandatory report because you want to make sure that you're reconciling your trust. So yes, but from a general perspective, it's good for your business. So you totally are in control of your income, your revenue, your expenses, and hence the profit and loss. Maintaining of original bank statements and books, canceled checks, detailed duplicate deposit slips. Okay, we're just breaking this down further to give you very pragmatic examples that become a component. But yes, marrying this bookkeeping software or this bookkeeping system, manual, automated, whatever it may be, as close to real-life bank statements is the whole goal. That's the game. That's the name of the game, right? You want to make sure that what's happening in real life in the bank and what's reporting in the bookkeeping software or the system is close. And if there is a mismatch because of the time period in which you're reconciling, you just want to make sure you're well aware of that and you report it. From a trust reconciliation perspective, you do need to put it in a document so that when your auditors come by and ask you for that trust reconciliation report on a monthly basis, you can show them why the two numbers were off, because the money that you deposited into the bank did not reflect in the bank right away. Let's say you did the reconciliation report on the 25th. The bookkeeping software knows that you've got the $1,000 retainer, whereas the bank, it only reflected on the 26th, and hence bank is off $1,000 compared to your bookkeeping system. Again, just another example. Preparing your financial statements. Okay, this is not so much a rule, and this is part of the Law Society looking after you in terms of wanting you to be aware of things that you can do to be profitable and be aware of your firm's financial health, right? Generating those income statements, those profit and loss statements, having those deep dive analytics, but knowing about your business is very critical, because the sooner and the faster and the more often you can have a tab and gauge the heartbeat of your business, the better it is. You don't want to have your eyes shut and hope for the best to happen, right? You always want to be looking at it, even if it's not the best month, not the best week, or the best year. You want to be aware of that, so that then you can put your brain to work to go towards the direction that you decided to begin with. Quick question is, again, looking at examples of these documents? So most definitely yes. So what I'll do is I will spend the next, it's about 350 files, spend the next 15 to 20 minutes going through these slides and keep some time for Q&A, but also walk you through these different documents as you should expect it in any system just by using the uLaw as an example. But I want to ensure that I'm keeping the sanity of this presentation. This is not a salesy presentation. This is supposed to be information sharing. So I will certainly honor that question by sharing the uLaw documents, but I'll probably reserve that to the last. Thank you. Okay, so we've looked at financial management. So let's look at some of the documentation, just like how we did it for the client intake. Some of the documents that, especially when it relates to trust money, and we emphasize a lot on trust money because that's where the Law Society auditors emphasize their effort as well. Okay? Ledgers. So whether it's the trust ledger or the general ledger, it's generally generated for a time period for many clients that accumulated in that time period. You have trust receipt journals, disbursement journals, and reconciliation reports are some of the most common documents that you're going to come across when it comes to financial obligations. And there are furthermore documentations that come along with, so like Form 9A, which is for our friends in British Columbia joining us today. It's a form in Ontario. Every time you do an electronic fund transfer of funds between a trust account to a general account, it needs to be accompanied by a form that outlines the purpose of that transfer. Okay, so that's called a Form 9A. That's a big component. You've obviously got all of your income statements, not in a trust account, but from a general account perspective, you have your income statements, profit and loss statements, etc. Okay? All right. So with another 30 minutes left in our presentation, we come to maybe the fourth major component of today's presentation. So we've looked at client intake, file management, and financial management, and the components of it. Then we'll move along to business management. So you being a business owner, okay? Keep in mind that, as I said before, the trick of the trade is really being able to manage these two different areas. One is being a legal professional and all the other attributes that surround it. On the other hand, being a business owner. And again, this is if you work for a law firm and if you're an employee of a law firm, maybe not, it doesn't affect you right away. But if you're a solo entrepreneur, small law firm, you're a business owner, equity owner, part of the business, these are critical too. What are some of the components that go in terms of keeping in mind of things that you may want to invest in as you manage that business to run a successful legal firm? Some of the key components. Software, and could be whether it's legal accounting software or whether that's just Microsoft Word, Excel, whatever the software may be. There are some investments that need to be made as a legal firm, as I said, to be more efficient, more advanced, and actually to provide a bit of a curve, a bit of a competitive edge, if you will, to some of your clients. Being technologically, it doesn't have to be advanced, but being or having the acumen of technology as part of your firm's, character actually provides a lot more confidence to your client because they understand that you're in today's context. A great example would be providing the ability for your clients to pay online, right? So part of your invoice, you could have a little link that is sent along so that he or she can actually pay for it at their own leisure instead of having to send you a check every time. Okay, so softwares enable such level of sophistication and automation. Keep in mind all of those different components. And again, if you're part of the family law and if you're going to be doing separation and divorce made is a great example. PC Law is a legal accounting software that you install onto your desktop. uLaw is one such you have on the cloud. You have other softwares that are available. Keep in mind that's part of that business management. You're having to invest in software. computers are a big component of your investment, whether it's a laptop, iPad, Android tablet, desktop. As you plan your business, or part of that business plan, every year you want to keep in mind these expenses. Security. Okay, so this is a subject area by itself, but let's talk about it real quick. As part of your obligation of confidentiality to your client, you want to make sure that by design, you have a way of managing data, especially client data, in a very secure manner. Security is not also about being able to back up the information on a regular basis so that when shit hits the fan, that you always have a backup. You always have a way of recovering things because it's very critical. You could have, there's different, if you had a file system in an application or in a desktop and that desktop crashes and you didn't have a backup, then that's very unfortunate. That's not a situation you want to be in. Then you're going to have to recreate the past. If you are going with cloud-based providers, you want to ask the pertinent question up front before you sign up with them about all the obligations, the responsibilities, and the service level agreements that they oblige of you accessing their cloud environment and you storing your data in their cloud environment. For example, first question is, if you're a Canadian legal professional, making sure that the data is stored in Canada. Okay? How often do they do backups? So you really want to ask those right questions. How secure is that cloud environment? Is it secure? Is it encrypted? Is it 256-bit bank-grade encrypted? Those are the types of questions you want to ask to ensure yourself that you're well safeguarded. Mobile. Now, as we, in 2017 and moving forward, the computer trend is moving towards where people are using their mobile phones, their iPads and tablets more so than their desktops and laptops even. Okay, so everyone's going the mobile way. Now, that doesn't mean that the security components do not apply to mobile. Like you've often heard of how mobile phones are actually more vulnerable to viruses these days, as much as laptops and desktops are or were at one point of time. Ensure that you have security for your mobile devices. Upgrade your mobile device, as and when that Android update or iOS update comes along. Ensure that you have a password for your phone. As trivial as it sounds, I'm sure we have that one-off friend who doesn't have a password for his phone or her phone. Okay? Have a way that you can back up your information. Have a way that you are updating your mobile phones or iOS laptops with security. Norton is a great example of how you can secure even your mobile phone today. Talk to your provider about the different security components that they can provide you. These are things that as a legal professional you may not be asking yourself, but something to keep in mind. You have a desktop system to provide that competitive edge. How cost-effective is it to actually have the remote access? Okay. As I said, the security component is a subject area by itself, but whether it's especially I can talk about the cloud-based security because that's closer to who we are as a company. uLaw is a Canadianly hosted 256-bit encrypted bank-grade security cloud-based system. We back up our data that's in us every day or every hour, sorry. And it's all available within servers in Ottawa and Montreal. We have CAPTCHA, which is a two-pronged security access. We're also, us and others in this ecosystem are also growing through this legal tech revolution in making our systems that much more secure and ease of access. Security, but also ease of access. Two different components, very hard, but we're trying to make that happen. So those are some of the examples of questions you may want to ask companies like us. Okay, so I'll kind of move along with regards to the next step. The question is, do I trust a free download? No. So really depending on what was meant for. Again, you have free Adobe PDF readers, for example. You want to ensure that the source of that download is well respected. So if you're downloading this from adobe.com, it's probably not an issue. If you're downloading this from click here to get free stuff from your neighborhood, then you probably don't want to do that, right? So in general, in life, as we all know, there's no free lunch. Professional obligations. So we've kind of come to, the last aspects of the 2 slides, professional time management. So a big part of the professional obligations. So this is something we don't hear about too much, is you being now a part of this community of legal professionals in your jurisdiction, right? It's a bit of a sisterhood, brotherhood aspect. Some of you like it, some of you don't. But, you want to take advantage of the positive vibes any community can give you. There's always going to be the bad egg. There's always going to be that bad experience. But in embracing that community and that sense of bond in that profession, these are some of the examples that you want to keep in mind. So an obligation to begin with is you having your required CPD hours. You know that if you're a legal professional in Ontario, you need 3 hours of professionalism credits, right? As an example. So being part of such sessions such as today, where you can take advantage of CPD hours, whether it's for free or whether you're paying for it, you want to make sure you're doing the right thing to get those 3 hours for this year. Same thing with substantial. Being part of professional associations. Now, we don't endorse any association. We've just mentioned that because you have the opportunity to. We as software professionals belong to software associations where we get to know and learn and be part of that community and learn about things. Depending on your profession, there are many different associations that provide information, equal mind share, friendship, commodorship, whatever that may be. Sometimes associations even provide you with discounted commodities like software, insurance, which is a big part of your business management expense, is getting yourself an insurance. Memberships may actually have kind of a wholesale arrangement, if you will, with these different organizations. So being part of a professional association does definitely empower you, though there's always going to be the good, bad, and the ugly experience. Okay? Reviewing, part of that professional obligation is you being well aware through various channels, through self-serve or being part of actively a member of these associations and talking to friends and colleagues, ensuring that you're always reviewing the new legislations and laws, researching and finding different ways in which people have won cases so that you can definitely be better at how you represent yourself and your cases, being on top of your game. That's very important because that's the crux of who you are as a legal professional. And most importantly, reviewing professional conduct guidelines, okay? Whether that's guidelines that you conduct at your firm as well as resonate amongst all others who are part of your firm. So we've heard of stories, again, part of my storytelling is this lawyer friend, he started as a solo. He grew his firm to a point where he was now able to work with other lawyers and got to a point where I think the character, the conduct, what that he brought into the table, the way he looked at clients and bringing those conducts into the table was not necessarily the same way others have. And the realization was that there was never a way of establishing what those conducts are as part of that firm or as part of that, the guidelines of the professionalism that's reviewed by LSUC. There has to be a way that you can establish firm rules that talk about these guidelines as part of your firm. So it's not just yourself. As you grow, you want to keep in mind that you want to resonate that with the rest of the crew. Not going to spend too much time in time management because we want to manage time. We only have another 20 minutes in our CPD today, and we all have a wonderful Friday afternoon and a weekend to take care of. But we didn't want to talk very high-level time management, not like a Stephen Covey, but very specific to what we come across from our legal professional friends that we deal with. 3 critical takeaways. As much as we encourage people to do, especially our friends who don't use the software, if you do use a software like uLaw, you know that there's a to-do list. Other softwares do have that as well. But have a to-do list. Okay, maintaining or starting your day with a to-do of tasks that you need to get accomplished. There are many different tasks that you come across, which is very unique to your profession. As I said, multitasking is a very critical component of being a legal professional, and I'm sure you're totally embracing that and accepting that fact. But having the right tools, having software, because today is the time and age where legal tech is embracing your industry. So this is a great time to be a legal professional. Okay, SAP has not embraced it, but there's so many different product companies that have embraced legal tech and are providing the tools and technologies. And to-do list is a big part of any practice management software today, whether that's matter related or if it's just personal time related. Combining that so you have a quick 360 view of your day. That's very critical. Maintaining a to-do list of tasks that you want to get accomplished and also having a way to check them off your list as and when they happened is a must-have. Management and focusing on active files. So if you don't have a way of categorizing your files, chronologically arranging them, even giving them a bit of a status based on whether they're an active, closed, archived, unused, so you can come up with different statuses. But focusing your effort on the active files, little things like that, subtle things like that can go a long way. Because if you're stuck with vanilla folders and if you're stuck with window folders that don't have classifications, then you're just spending time. A good majority of time in law firms are spent in just searching for stuff. Okay? So you can reduce the time that you spend on searching for stuff by getting to what you need to faster by categorizing them. Time docketing for non-billable tasks. Okay? You know what this is. Again, this is understanding and measuring non-billable tasks that you do on a day-to-day basis. Again, searching for stuff. You can't charge that to a client. You shouldn't technically charge it to a client. Another extreme of that is also appreciating and understanding the pro bonus that you provide. Because if you're not appreciating the pro bonus, and if you do by a habit provide pro bono hours to clients, it just becomes a bad habit over time. So being able to measure pro bono activities, being able to track it, and being able to learn from it, and improvising yourself, then focusing on billable activities is all critical to how you can manage time. So outside of the many things that we could have spoken about time management, those are the 3 critical topics that we thought would be a little bit more relevant and subtle and sometimes overlooked when it comes to specifically legal professionals. Okay? All right, so we come to personal management. So we spoke about time. So we spoke about personal, this is obviously a very sensitive area. It's very personal. It's by the individual. But in general, we've looked at surveys that have been taken by law societies over the last 10, 15 years of lawyers, paralegals, different legal professionals across Canada, across North America. And one thing that's commonly resonates is over a period of time, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, if you're not taking the time off, enjoying you as an individual, and if you're overstressed, because the legal industry, the work that you do, the kind of people that you come across, depending on the status of practice, the amount of stress that you handle as a professional is stressful as it is, that if you do not take the time to relax and live your life and have that personal space, there is going to be a time when you actually burn out. Okay? So you need to be satisfied with the work that you do. You obviously educated to be who you are, but you also need to understand how you can free up space for your own time. You also want to understand areas of practice that you're good at, and more importantly, areas of practice that actually earn you more money. Areas of practice that, these are different subtle angles or insights that you can drive out of your practice, obviously over a period of time and through experience and talking to others. But over a period of time, if you've had the self-realization, that's going to, in a big way, help have you personally manage yourself and look at your firm and other things around that. So growth, progress, and financial success, if those are critical components of your practice and who you are, then you definitely need to find a way that you can learn and track and measure and reflect on it. Take that vacation that you always long for. Obviously, you have financial goals that enable your ability to do it. And as I said early on, find work-life balance. Very recent survey found that, both professionals in general need to have that work-life balance to bring more energy back the next day into their work. Okay? Stress, obviously, in today's aging world, it's a very commoditized world, very comparative. You're going to always look at the next guy who's driving a Tesla. The guy who's driving a Tesla is looking at something else. He's looking at a Maserati. So it's always a very stressful life as it is, very financially focused. But yes, there are many different things that can be done. We spoke about it. Sport, exercise, keeping yourself physically fit, apart from being physically fit. And yeah, there's many activities that you can do so that you can spend more time personally, be refreshed, rejuvenated, bring that back into your legal life the next day, okay, or the next week, etc. With another 10 minutes left in the CPD session, I'll probably wrap up with just a few more slides. Benefits of practice management, we spoke about that, just a quick, overarching component. We spoke about why software, why practice management. We want to just leave this with you as you ponder through the benefits that software and practice management tools can give you. As you consider practice management tools, keep in mind the total cost of ownership that becomes part of that business management cost that you incur as an individual or as a business. Are you going to be in the business of managing and backing up and doing all of that? What is the total cost of ownership when it comes to the different components of your business expenses and that practice management tool? Efficiencies that the product can bring in, automated court forms, automated ledgering, to-do list, checklists, calendarization. These are all components of practice management tools today that can actually alleviate a lot of that manual tasks that you would actually otherwise do. Being compliant is unfortunately or fortunately a big component of who you are as a legal professional. It's in fact a very important step. And I say unfortunately because many times it's almost an oversight and it's almost an after the fact effect. So you've done your business, you've started, you've figured out, all right, I'm going to be audited in the next 12 months or 18 months of my business. I will get to it when I get to it. I'll cross the bridge when it comes. But unfortunately, sometimes it's a bit too late. There have been, examples where people have lost licenses because of non-compliance. So from the get-go, do the research, do the switch if you have to find a practice management that can also keep you compliant. And in today's age and time, if you have the luxury of moving along with technology And if you are interested, keep in mind that you do have now the opportunity through advent of technology for legal industries that you could be desktop free. You could practice anywhere you want, as long as you have access in a very secure way to those files and matters and the information that your law firm has, okay, across multiple devices. Those are things that you want to keep in mind when you explore for practice management or ask the current practice management tool, software, or system that you currently have. We're just adding a little bit more to the file management component, but we've spoken about this: organization, ensuring that you've tracked every interaction, whether that's in person or phone or otherwise, and docket them and prioritize them and categorize them across those different files. Ensure you're managing your disbursements, a big component of your financial aspect of your business, because if you're paying upfront and you're not getting paid on time, then that's not good for your business. And take the time to close out old matters. The last thing you want to be looking at is staring at files that have already been done a long time ago. Okay, so managing an active list of current, open, closed files would save you a lot of time and a lot of stress. The last slide I probably want to leave you with is a big part of your business is understanding that business health. And you want to ask these questions as you work towards improving your business. And you can do that at any stage, whether you're a seasoned campaigner or if you're just getting started with legal business. Understand the state of your practice. And if you're just getting started, find out from others who've been in that business, in that silo of practice, of things that you can learn from, of pitfalls that you can avoid and the successes that you can repeat. And if you have been in the business over a period of time, obviously tracking, measuring, and reflecting on it is going to help. But one of the critical components of a practice management tool is the ability to track, measure, and help you reflect in an automated way through that software system. Okay? And why would you need to take those reflections? Is so that you can take corrective actions at a timely basis so that you're not overloading your business. So for example, ensuring that you're raising invoices on time, ensuring that you're transferring trust funds from trust to general on time, because these are things that are going to impact your business. If you're not moving money from trust to general on a timely basis, then that's just money sitting on the table to be made. Knowing how old invoices have still not been paid. And again, reflecting it back to the area of practice and the type of client, the referral that was, okay? Because the reason for all of this, and again, it might come across as kind of a repeat talk, but as a solo practitioner or as a small law firm that's always trying to be better at the neck every day, empowering yourself with the power of the large law firms is actually going to be more meaningful because you're now able to appreciate and understand, past success and reflect both success and failure and reflect on it to improve the future. Because it's a software as a practice management tool can easily allow you to do that compared to you being able to do it on a manual basis. Okay? Not talking about any specific software in general, practice management in general. And analytics in today's, day and age are a part of practice management. Not all of them, but good practice management tools have data analytics as a big part of their business and their product. And those analytics are going to enable you to always keep a tab on not only compliance, but the efficiency of your business as a legal business. Okay? Calendarization, automation of forms, all a big part of that. With another 5 more minutes left, and I can go on and on, but these were kind of the closing statements we wanted to make in terms of the practice management CPD today. Is as you go down the path of being a legal professional, these are many of the obligations that want to keep in mind. And keep in mind that practicing or practice management, whether that's through a system or a process or a software, that you always want to keep in mind of these obligations and best practices that can ensure success by design, whether you're a new legal professional or a seasoned campaigner looking to improve. Hopefully this session kind of reiterates the beliefs that you have or has provided you a newer insight or a different way of looking at things if you haven't already looked at these things to begin with. Okay, so we looked at client intake, file management, the financial aspects of your business, the business management, the obligations that you have to your profession, including the CPD hours like today, and you are able to go into your Law Society's web portal and search for everything practice management, and you would be able to apply the 1.5 professionalism credits. And I kindly request you to use the chat window. We have and ensure you're participating in today, because we do often get asked by the Law Society to tell us who participated so you can fully take advantage of the credits. And we have provided you a link where you can provide your attendance so that we can assure that you have participated in today's session and then take advantage of those 1.5 credits. So yeah, professional time management, and we spoke about the time you need to take for your own personal management as well. So with that, I will open the chat window for any questions that there may be. And thank you very much for your time today. If you don't have any questions, we assure you that this webinar will be recorded and available on our YouTube channel and sent to all those who do mark their attendance as an email. Thank you very much. I sincerely do thank all the positive feedback, and for your feedback on things that we can do better to make this more meaningful to you. CPD is not mandatory. Yes, the CPD is not mandatory to non-practicing lawyers or legal professionals. That's correct. Thank you very much. Thanks for all the amazing feedback. Yes, a quick question is about how you can apply the CPD credits. You do log into the Law Society's, so whether it's Upper Canada or British Columbia, you use your username password to log into your portal. And under, I think, the CPD tab or Courses tab, you are able to search for the topic. And let me bring that up real quick. It's called Everything Practice Management. Search for it. It's going to bring it up. You can use that to apply, and you could say it's 1.5 hours. But quick reminder, I mean, we're actually, it's a CPD month. We actually have a CPD upcoming next week, which is going to be talking about, so today was Everything Practice Management, and a very specific topic is going to be about legal expense management. Okay? And that's approved also for 1 hour of CPD credits, but this is only in Upper Canada. So our friends in British Columbia, you'd have to wait a little bit more longer to have this approved as CPD in your jurisdiction. And yeah, please kindly do use our feedback form to mark your attendance as well as give your feedback so that we can always be better at what we're doing. So maybe another minute for last questions, and I will close the webinar from there. Oh, thank you. One last question is about the documents in uLaw. I do apologize that, as I said, this was meant to be more informative. Didn't want to specifically get down to the uLaw product, but we're happy to provide that as a separate session. And Absolutely. So we're able to definitely provide that as a separate session. Well, thank you, everyone, and have yourself a fantastic weekend, and enjoy the summer while it lasts. Thank you. Thank you. Take care.